is the right thing at a particular time. And so from after that, now that we understand how the month works in terms of spirituality, we went into the micro within that month. And the most consistent theme in every month is Shabbat. And so we brought in Rabbi Hirsch on Shabbat, and Rabbi Hirsch explains to us that Shabbat is a reminder. So Rabbi Hirsch, he asked a question. He says, creation was made throughout, the 6 days of creation. And on the seventh day, Hashem ceased to create. But before he finished creation, he created man, right? And so all the creation before man is subjugated by God's law, meaning that the tree grows the way the tree is supposed to grow. The flower grows the way the flower is supposed to grow. The deer grows, the animals grow the way that the animals are supposed to grow. And we have rocks and all these different things, but all these things have a spark of God. And to go a little bit outside of Rabbi Hirsch and to bring Rabbi Pinchas Eliyahu's Torah in, these different levels, these different kingdoms, the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, and animal kingdom, all have sparks of God. And these sparks of God actually have a process of correction. They have a process of transformation where a rock can become a plant, and a plant can become an animal, and an animal at a certain level can even reach a level where it could become a human, meaning these sparks of God can evolve. And the highest level of these sparks is mankind. So this idea, so Rabbi Hirsch asked the question, well, if man is free will, could do whatever he wants, what protects the rest of creation that has this evolutionary process, and that's why they were created, what protects man, or what protects these other creatures from man's free will? What reminds man that man does not own planet Earth? Man does not own anything. We don't even own our bodies. Everything that we have, Hashem gave to us, like almost like you go to a car place and you lease a car or you rent a car or whatever. In that same way, the reality that we live in is not ours. We're only here on a rent basis or a lease basis for a certain amount of time. And eventually our soul goes back to Hashem after 120. But while we're here, Hashem gave us specific rules on how to deal with nature, how to deal with our fellow man. So Rabbi Hirsch asked the question, what reminds us of this? What reminds us that Hashem is omnipresent, is the creator of the universe, is the master of the universe, and we're just subjects to man. Subjects to Hashem. What reminds us of that? And so this was the idea of Shabbat. And not just Shabbat as a concept, but Shabbat as something that we keep, right? Because originally we learned that mankind as a whole was subjugated to Shabbat, this seventh day of rest during the time of Babel and before, the Tower of Babel, and before that, they were subject to this. But because of what happened on the Tower of Babel, Hashem says, I'm going to remove this influence from all of humanity, and I'm going to place that responsibility on a specific community. And this specific community, first it was individuals, our avos, and then it became a nation on during the Exodus of Mitzrayim for Bnei Israel, the children of Yaakov. So through this process, first individuals, because Avraham went out and taught people, Yitzhak, developed Yaakov, and Yaakov had, 4 wives and 12 sons, and those sons had descendants. But all of them at that time were, in a way, a somewhat of an education vehicle for the rest of humanity, more coming from Avraham. But when Moshe left Mitzrayim with the Jewish people, and even say the Arab Rav, that was the beginning of this education process for all of humanity. That all of humanity had for lack of a better terms, a university of professors called the Jewish people, and this university was educating the whole world of God's existence, our responsibility underneath God, and what the goal of humanity ultimately is. And if you go to the first share that we have, we go very much into that, and we bring a Gemara. So now that we understand this idea of the holiness of the month, now that we've went into the mission within the holiness of each and every month, which is this idea of Shabbat, then we're going to go into this idea of the year, right? Because the year itself has specific qualities that enable mankind to be able to achieve specific objectives. And again, when we understand, you ask the question, why are the Jewish people have so many laws that they have to keep? They have so many rules that they live by. it's not that we just doing it because, it's not just because we're special. It's the fact that we were given this responsibility to educate all of humanity on the godliness, on the rootliness, on the kedusha of the world. And if you look at most of the innovations in the world, you can trace them either from the Jewish people themselves, or even further back from our avos, and even further back to, say, Noah, Shem and Aver, all the way back to Adam, the first original man. This spirituality, this spiritual system has been passed down all the way from Adam, the first man, all the way to the teachers like we have right here, Basina Kadisha, all the way to here right now. So the question is, the idea is like this. Going forward, what infuses us every single day? Is it the food that we eat? Is it the sunlight that we receive? Or is there something else? Because our sages tell us that each human being has a soul and has a body. Every human being has a soul and a body. And the amount of light or godly influence that our soul receives determines our experience in this whole world. And that's why when you see people, whether they're Jewish or not Jewish, but when you see people going out and doing charity and helping people and trying to understand their lives and working on themselves, they live at a different life of inspiration than people who never question these things. And we say that these different things that we do, which is growing, changing, learning, helping, all these different things, sharing, all these different attributes, these are things that the Torah asks of us. So in the same way that God created a mechanism called Shabbat to educate us, to remind us, and to infuse us with the strength, to infuse us with this light, because it's a blessed day, that blessing, that ruchnius, that kedusha on that particular day infuses us to be able to go throughout the week and remember what our responsibility and what our mission is. But through life, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we experience things that hurt us. Sometimes we have different things that disappoint us. Sometimes we need to recreate ourselves. So how do we do that? What's going on? Do we go to a therapist? What do we do? So the Torah created, when God created the world, he also created different moments throughout this 12-month cycle, and sometimes 13 during a leap year, this 12-month cycle, where there's certain influences that come into the world, just like we have on Shabbat. There's an influence on Shabbat every day that it renews us and allows us to understand that God is running the world. That's why we don't do work, we don't do malacha, we don't do work on Shabbat, we don't use the things, the worldly electronic devices, we don't use cell phones and Facebook or television or any of these types of things on Shabbat, because we're reminding ourselves that Hashem runs the world. And even though we're not doing anything, even though we're not working, even though we're not doing it, the world is still functioning because God has an invisible influence that happens every day. And so to remind us, so we don't think that we're masters, we take a day and we just reflect on this idea. We sit back and reflect on this idea. So not only that, in the same way that we have Shabbat that allows us to remember our mission, we have days throughout the year, that specific days, specific time periods of the year, where God sends an influence from the heavens, and this influence from the heavens comes into this world. And if we capture this influence, almost like if a person is in the desert and they're thirsty and they're starving and they're hot and they're tired and they can't walk anymore and they just need a cup of water, and suddenly they see a cup on the ground and they pick it up, and out of nowhere water comes, the perfect amount of water shoots out of the sky into their cup, and they drink that water and it allows them to continue on their journey. In that same way, Hashem sends a light from the heavens to this world, and then our soul can capture it, and then from the capturing of that light, we're able to move forward. So